Leaders are not born, they're built. While building leaders is a challenge, at Engineering Leadership, we've created a framework that actively guides anyone to discovering their potential. We established 17 constant values that cannot be compromised no matter the situation. They offer insight to the core of leadership and provide a starting point that simplifies the world's most complicated topics. With these constants, you will be able to empower yourself and your team to tackle situations deemed impossible.
Well, welcome. I'm Doug Hawk, your host for Engineering Leadership. Appreciate everybody joining us today for another episode. A very exciting one with us today. We have Charlie Blackwell Thompson joining us. She's the launch director for NASA's Exploration Ground Systems program, and most importantly, the launch director for Mission Artemis, which is going to take us back to the moon, which is something that we're going to talk some about today, certainly in the course of exploring leadership as our topic. So thanks so much for joining us, Charlie. And I wanted to just open. I normally ask, why'd you pick this constant in our framework? But mission seems pretty core to what you're up to these days. So just tell us a little bit about, mission. And what I did want to explore starting out here was, our premise is that in a typical engineering mindset, I'm a chemical engineer and just, like most of us, trained to sort of take big, complicated things, break them down into small, digestible bites, and then, through doing that and through that process, being able to accomplish, seemingly impossible things at times. And you guys are in the business of the impossible. So I want to just explore that to get us started and how that's played a key role in your success and engineers in general, how we can apply that kind of thinking as we consider leadership positions in organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it exactly right. It's in taking that big goal and then breaking it down into measurable and achievable steps. And so mission to me is really important, and something I feel really strongly about. Here at NASA, the mission is always right in front of you. And I think that's important for teams, regardless of what business you're in, regardless of what project you're working on. It's having that mission in front of you. And the reason is it allows you to align your work, align your priorities, and align your team to this thing that, to me, mission answers the question, the big question of, who are we? What are we about? In my case, where are we going? But those big questions, and then from that mission, then you kind of step back and you said it. It's like any other engineering problem that we learned about in school, right? It's just a little bit of a different twist on it, where you take that mission and then you think about, okay, well, what are the goals? What are the things that support this? What are those objectives? What are those milestones? What are those specific steps? And then all of a sudden, what you find is you've gone from this big vision or this big mission to something that's very achievable and very measurable as you make your way toward that big goal. And so to me, mission is something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I think we can incorporate not only into our work lives but into our personal lives, and so it's just something that I feel really strongly about. So I'm thrilled with the opportunity to talk about that a little bit this morning.
That's great, and I think from one of the ways that our premise is that leadership. We're trying to demystify leadership, particularly and with a particular view from the engineering mindset, because I think part of our mission is to, convince or help and support more engineers in considering leadership roles and thinking about their career perhaps differently. Certainly, I think, obviously, I want to talk about the impact that can have on young women with you today too. I think, we watched your 60 Minutes interview with the family, and I had my daughter with me, which was really cool. And I told her I was going to talk to you, and she's 14. So, for 5 minutes, Dad was cool again, because I got to talk to you. So it's, I just think inspiring young engineers of all backgrounds is certainly a key part of our mission here. And core to that, though, is breaking down, that mindset, believing that leadership can be taught, can be learned, that it can be a process, and that it can be, our tagline, if you will, is leaders are built, not born. And getting folks past that sort of, what I call that fixed mindset of, well, you're either a born leader or you're not. And then, our assertion is that couldn't be anything further from the truth, right? And so just your thoughts on how important it is for engineers who are interested in leadership to sort of apply the same discipline perhaps that we've had in other areas of our development to the leadership topic, and finding ways to take those first steps.
No, I completely agree with you. To me, and it's probably reflective of the time when I got my engineering degree. But, I spent a lot of time in school, and I would say even in early career, learning the technical pieces of my job. But it wasn't until later that I began to work on that leadership piece. And so I think it's great that we're putting emphasis on that. And as you said, kind of applying the same types of lessons to develop in that capability as we do to develop in our technical capabilities as well. And I also agree that, there are certainly folks that I have run into across the course of my career where it just seems that leadership comes natural to them. But there is a whole lot of us out there who have to go learn and hone that skill. And so it is absolutely something that can be learned. It's something that you can improve upon over the course of your career. And it definitely improves with study and being intentional about those things. Hey, Doug, for whatever reason, my video has frozen here. Probably, I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yep. See and hear you fine.
Okay, let me see if I can just do.
Back.
Let's see, I seem to be back.
Okay.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you
now. Okay, let's try it again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. And I can see my videos back. Sorry about that interruption. Hopefully they'll be able to edit that out.
Yeah, no, we've had, some of these are a little more work than others, so we're making them learn their craft, right? So it'll be fine. One of the things I always want to explore with folks is that sort of pivot point, that what I call the leadership moment, right? Of okay, we're trained, in many ways we're trained to, focus on getting the answer, delivering the data, determining the outcome, right? And I struggled with it for a number of years, trying to pivot to, okay, I can't be running to get the answer. I need to be thinking about which questions to ask, right? And sort of making that transition from a key contributor, key provider of, the answer to how do I step into these leadership roles? Was there a moment for you where, I know, and obviously it'd be a chance maybe to explain a little bit how NASA works, right? With launch controllers and test directors and sort of that whole progression. But one of the things I would like to just explore is, was there a moment in time where you're like, it sort of crystallized and the light went off and you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to do things differently, approach things differently than I have as a engineer, and make that sort of pivot mentally into leadership?
Yes, absolutely. I would say for me, I spent the first probably, and you work your way up through different aspects. So if I were to so I hate to even give the number, because then it's like you realize, wow, this is kind of old. But I've been in the workforce for 30 years, and I spent probably the first 15 years of my career working. I've been working in launch ops for the most part of my career. And that's exactly where I want to be. So I'm really lucky in that way is that I had a moment that crystallized for me as a young woman still in school at Clemson University when I came here and I'm coming to you this morning from the Launch Control Center. And so when I came here as a senior at Clemson, I walked into Firing Room 1, which is just to my right here, and I knew as soon as I walked in that room, I want to work here one day. I want to get me a seat in this room. And so I had that moment where there was no doubt for me. I'd gone on other job interviews, I had done other things, but when I walked in that firing room, I knew I want to earn my way in. I want a seat in this room on one launch day down the road. So that was a moment for me, not necessarily in that leadership piece, but so I spent the first 15 years of my career and I was working in developing my technical skills. I did earn myself a seat in that room a couple of years after I started. And I started out and I worked in software, and I worked in software verification and validation. So I was testing software. And then I worked on payload avionics systems that flew on the shuttle. And so again, you're developing that technical capability to go put together these systems, test them out, and make sure they're ready to go fly. And then I kind of expanded that technical knowledge to be the electrical integration pieces of payloads that would fly on the shuttle, and then how we integrated and tested them, and sat in the Launch Control Center for launch, ensuring that they were ready to go fly. And so for probably 10 or 15 years, I was really focused on how do I develop my technical capability, and then how do I broaden that technical capability and kind of make it just as deep as maybe the thing I left behind. And so after about 15 years, I had an opportunity to move over into the test director office, and it was a different office. I mean, they are responsible for executing the launch countdown for the launch director. And so, you're not necessarily the expert on this very specific thing, but you have to be able to look across a big team of people. For shuttle, that was about 200 plus people that are in the firing room on launch day. And it's to be able to look across all the work and to organize it, to understand the priorities, to provide direction to the team on what those priorities might be, and to influence and lead. And sometimes those are related and yet different, but influence and lead this diverse team. And so I think for me, when I became a NASA test director, there was a moment when I realized that the way in which I have done things in the past, which was always to go develop that very deep technical knowledge, is now I need a different. I need some of that, but I also need a different skill set. And so that was probably the moment for me when I realized that there's a leadership piece of this, there's a communication piece of this, there's a not being afraid to raise your hand and establish direction piece of this, that you got to go refine and work on. And so that was probably for me when I realized that just as I've worked on those other things, now I need to go work on this leadership piece.
Yeah, it's that, what got me here is not going to get me there, right? Moment.
Right.
I think it's so important for, part of what we're trying to hopefully help folks with is to ponder those questions earlier, and think about it as they're not that developing the expertise and being a killer contributor is not the path to success, because for engineers so often it is, but trying to sort of ask some of these broader questions as early as possible, and to get folks to sort of raise their eyes to the horizon and say, I still have to get done what's in front of me, but it is, I think spending a bit more time. And I think this, where I'm headed with this a little bit, is because mission is important in this mix too, right? Is okay, as a leader, trying to get the whole organization understand context and understand all of the other moving parts and externalities without having any expertise in it, right? Because they have to, they may not ever see that part of the sort of puzzle that's coming together to accomplish the mission, and the importance of trying to be that, and we call it evangelize, right? Like be that prime communicator of the mission. And how do you shape that into the different areas of expertise you're trying to influence, right? Like you said, you had 200 people in that room, all with different backgrounds, all with different experiences, all with vastly different areas of expertise, trying to bring them, not only were they, obviously they're in the room, so they know the grand details of the mission, but as a leadership skill set to translate that into a point of view that they can really get behind and totally align with.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, in some ways, I probably have it easier than maybe some, right? Because we have a really visible milestone called launch, and so when you have 200 folks in the room, back in shuttle, we're a little less than that for Artemis, but when you have a big team, and you have this milestone called launch, and we know when that launch window opens, and we know we need to be ready, but in even saying that, so it's kind of easy to get the team aligned to that, but sometimes, as you were describing, you may have a very important piece of work that is not happening in the last 10 minutes of launch countdown. And so you might say, well, I'm doing this, a day or two before. And why is it so important that I get it done in this period of time? But when you're orchestrating all of the work towards something like launch, a lot of the things do have to happen when they're planned to go happen. And that's not all that different from, the work that you do or many others do, where, there's a cadence to it, there's an order to it, and it needs to proceed that way. And so, for me, I think it's really easy, well, maybe not really easy, but certainly launch is a very visible milestone. But I think that's where it's important that when you establish, okay, here's where we're going, right? We're going to launch, and here's the day, and here's the minute that the launch window opens, and we are aligning to be ready for when that happens. But it's in looking at how all of the work, funnels into it and fits into meeting that point in time. And that's important to kind of step back and understand those pieces. And equally important, I think in leadership is communication, because it's in understanding how your piece fits and how important it is, right? Because I tell people all the time, there are no unimportant roles as we get ready for launch. Every role is important. Every job is important. They may not all happen in the last 10 minutes of launch countdown, but it doesn't mean it's not just as important as all the things that came before.
Right. Well, when you agreed to chat with us, I thought one of the really cool things about having you kind of take mission as a focus is, for those of us that aren't, launch directors, it's such a great example, right? Because part of what we're trying to accomplish as leaders is to find that same clarity in situations that are far less defined, right? Without providing the organization that sense of vision, clarity, alignment around a mission, it's hard to drive performance. It's hard to get folks to commit. It's hard to get that, we call that sort of incremental engagement and effort. It's not about what your job description is or what the requirements are. It's about, awareness of, well, yeah, I'm here to do this specific thing, but I get the bigger mission, and there's 12 other ways I could help today, and I'm going to lean in to those areas and do what I can. I've bought into the mission. I understand the importance of it, and I want us to succeed as a team in achieving that mission. So I think, part of our message here today is how, as you're thinking about your own organization, no matter what level you're at in it, is your mission in your own organization, your own team, your community, your family, is it as clear as Charlie's mission to take us back to the moon, right? Like, and if it was, how powerful would that be, right, for your organization to be in that situation, and how empowering it would be for your folks at every level work in a place like that, or to serve in a place like that has that clarity of purpose and mission. It makes decisions easier, makes the outcomes a lot clearer, and allows us to impart some excitement and sense of accomplishment, which is what gets everybody motivated.
Yeah, well, I completely agree. My daughter is a rower for her university, and sometimes and unfortunately we haven't been able to go watch her row because of COVID,
Right.
this year. But in years past, to me, it was a demonstration of, I think, to me, part of mission. When I watch her team and many other teams like hers get ready to go row, get ready to go put the boat in the water, they spend months, weeks and months ahead of time, ahead of the season, just like any sport, right? Getting ready. But it's never lost on me as I watch them. I'm reminded of the likeness to mission and kind of what we do every day. I mean, they're methodical in their preparation. How they pick the boat up, how they put it in the water, how they get in the boat, how they put their, what they call hands on, and how they begin to warm up. And when you watch a team that is really in sync rowing, right, everyone's pulling in the same rhythm, and they seem to just glide. Now, I know I don't row, but I have the greatest respect for the sport. It looks effortless, right? I know it's not effortless. I know they're working to make sure that they're in time, that they're, when the oars come out of the water, that they're at the same angle, because that makes a difference. But when you see all that working together, it just seems like, they're moving with agility and speed and grace, and it just looks so easy. And I think about that and then when you see maybe a boat that's struggling a little bit, where everybody's not rowing in time, right? They struggle with the course, they're not moving, and sometimes they're even working against each other, even though they're really well intentioned and they're working hard and they're pulling hard, but they're not pulling together. And so I always think about, when I'm watching, how applicable that is to mission, right? And so when you can establish that mission in whatever you're doing, and you can align your team to kind of, pull in time in the same cadence, it makes just such a huge difference in your meeting of the milestones, in your agility in getting there. It's just, it's such a help, and a help's not the right word. I'm struggling with the right word, but it really is critical. I think as you move your teams forward.
Well, and I think it's a great analogy, and it does do, when you can achieve that alignment, it does make certain. It's not that there's not effort involved, but it does make it more effortless, right? Like, and when there's dissonance in the organization, when there's misalignment, everything is hard, right? And despite being hard, the outcome is awful. And everyone can be working harder than they should have to, and still not accomplishing a lot, right? And it's so I think I do think it speaks to how important this is. I mean, one of the things I would ask is, as engineers, and certainly for me personally, one of the hardest things about pivoting to leadership was, I was a very shy kid. I was very, I'm probably, if I psychologically test out, I would test as an introvert. Focused on, loved math, science, numbers, things. I love to build stuff. And for me, the pivot was, well, if I'm going to get to build companies, which is to me just another thing to build, it's still the same mental exercise and satisfaction. Having to conquer this communication, I was terrified of public speaking, all those things that you sort of have to overcome. And not everybody has to be that leader. You don't, one of the things that we try to remind folks is, you don't have to be the life of the party. You don't have to be at the front of the room all the time. It's not about the attention. It's never about the limelight. You don't want to be that kind of leader. So sometimes the engineering perspective that might come, not the stereotype, but that often comes with our profession, can be a big asset. I mean, have you found that just sort of engaging in communications and working on that area of your skills has one, was it challenging for you? Where'd you kind of start on that spectrum, and then how has it served you as you've driven home this mission?
Yeah, so great question. So I am I'm an extrovert. So for me, and one of the challenges for me in COVID times is when we first started working from home and was not seeing my team, right? I get energy from others. I get energy from people. And so that was a tough transition for me. And so I probably started out with as an extrovert, right? And who loves to connect with people. But certainly there are lots of things that I remember when I was at Clemson, one of our projects, our design team projects, and we had to present our findings. And I remember that was probably the first time that I had to stand up in front of a team, with some of our professors in the audience and other members of the class and present. And, that was uncomfortable. I mean, and now it's something that, I do routinely and it's not uncomfortable. And so my message to folks that maybe that feels a little uncomfortable is sometimes you have to lean into that. I call it flexing, right? We all have natural things as individuals or as leaders that are easy for us, and then we have things that are not, that don't come as natural. But sometimes you have to flex into that. I mean, you have to get out of your comfort zone, and there's a couple of reasons to do that. The first is sometimes you find that even though it was uncomfortable in the beginning, that maybe as time went on, it's not so uncomfortable. And I'll share a personal story. So I remember when I was really at the beginning of my career, and we were running a test on some software and some limited hardware, and I had to put on a headset for the first time. And I put on my headset, and it was an old analog device back in the day. And so when you would talk in it, would kind of, it would echo in your ear a bit. And so you had to get used to that, because as you would begin to talk, then you would stop because there's something in your, and so the first time I did that, I had probably been on the job maybe 6 or 8 months. And I remember it was so uncomfortable for me. And I knew that, our communication system is, I mean, it's all over our center. I mean, people, are listening to that. And so I felt really uncomfortable with, I don't think I did a great job at that. It was a lot of stopping and starting. And I remember I took that headset off and I said to the individual that was assigned to mentor me, I said, well, I'm never doing that again. And then he laughed and he said, well, yes, you are. He said, that's part of our job. And you just have to get used to it. But I remember that initial reaction was, well, I'm never doing that again. And now that is so funny to me, because I wear a headset all the time, and I don't have one on today doing this interview, but a lot of times I'll actually put it on even for things like this, because, you don't pick up as much noise or whatever, but it feels so natural to me to have that headset on, and to talk over the communication loops. And it's something that I do regularly. But the first time I did it, I didn't like it so much. And so I think it's important to flex and get out of your comfort zone. One, because sometimes you find that while you may not have initially thought it was something for you, you might find that it really is. And the other one is that anytime you're out of your comfort zone, it's an opportunity for growth. And so while it may not feel, natural or great in the beginning, it usually is an area that you're adding to your tool bag, or you're adding to your skill set. And so it just presents a great opportunity that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We talked with Tony Mathis, who's the another Clemson engineer, CEO of GE Aviation. He termed it, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and sort of, recognizing that it's going to be uncomfortable, and part of your mission is to just do it enough, get the reps to where it becomes comfortable, in some cases even unconscious. If it's,
Right. It's almost like muscle memory.
Right. And if you can get to that stage, then, it's, might take a weakness and turn into a strength.
I think too, it's important to, and I don't know if I realized this when I was young, when I was early in my career, but we're all a work in progress, right? I mean, you can be as accomplished. I mean, I remember when I was young, right out of school, maybe an entry level engineer, maybe, 2, 3 years in, and I used to look at my leadership and I had great leadership, and I thought, wow, you know, I hope one day I can be like them. Well, I still look at them that way and think, wow, I hope one day I can be like them. But you all of us are a work in progress, and you continue to grow. Like at least that's how I feel for me, is that I continue to grow. I continue to try to hone my leadership styles, or there are things that I'm still working on, and so it's an opportunity throughout your career.
Well, I think that's a great point. It's also, as a leader, critical to make sure your folks understand that as well, right? I mean, actually this week I had someone come to me for answers on 2 or 3 things, and I said, I have no idea. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're all trying to figure it out. There is no oracle in the sky with all the answers, and having the vulnerability and humility and authenticity and all those things that come with good leadership, I also think starts with recognizing that we're all a work in progress, and that commitment to lifelong learning and ongoing self-improvement, is a commitment that, particularly to be in a leadership role, you have to make, right? Because it's the minute you think you all have it figured out is right before the world decides to wallop you in the head and remind you that you don't.
I think it's important too. I still do this. When I talk to young people, I encourage them, because this is something I did not do when I would say early in my career, but with time, because I think there are times when, maybe you don't want to say, or you have a reluctance to say, well, I don't know if I'm good at that, I mean, and so, one of the things that I encourage folks to do is, if you see a characteristic in a leader and you think, wow, they're great at that, don't be afraid to ask them, hey, I would really like to be better at this. And can you help me? Or you seem really good at that. Can you help me? What are the steps that you took? Because more than likely, they worked on it, right? More than likely, they read a book, went to a seminar, took a class, did self-study, talked to another leader, right? More than likely, it wasn't something that they just had. It was something that they worked on. And my experience has been, every time I've gone to someone and said, hey, you're really good at this thing, and I would like to be better at it, it has been such a welcoming, like, okay, well, I'll tell you what I did. And I think that's an important message for folks to know. It is okay to seek out where you think someone does something well, and ask them, how did you get good at that?
No, I think asking, and a good core leadership skill in and of itself, right? Of understanding how to ask for help, how to take the help, realizing you need help, and that most will give it, freely and with, excitement of their own. I mean, it's, every mentor and mentee and mentor program I've been in, folks always ask, I've set those up at every company I've led, and people say, well, can you continue to make the time for that? And I'm like, and then those I'm mentoring may say, thank you so much for the time. I'm like, no, thank you, because you don't realize how much you get back.
Right. Yep.
And how much you learn as the mentor in the process. And it might be on subjects completely unrelated to what, you were covering as a mentor, but time well spent. And I think the importance of seeking out mentors is certainly something that we encourage. Aside from key mentors, you mentioned books, resources, anything you'd love to share with the folks that is particularly helpful in those areas, or a book you just like to read over more than once, or anything like that?
Well, I'm a big team. I'm a big team person, and I think that I feel that way because I'm really blessed first off, an amazing team. And second off, I believe that, I often describe launch as it's something that's bigger than the sum of the individual efforts. And we only get there as a team. So a lot of my favorite books are centered around teams. So I think I go to The Advantage quite a bit. I like that book. I think it's a great resource that talks about the people aspect of a team. I like the 5 dysfunctions of a team. That's a pretty good course I took a while back that I found a lot of benefit, because it talks about, the foundation of a team starts with trust, and talks about roles and responsibilities and being clear on those, clear on expectations, clear on accountability. And then at the top of that pyramid is the results, focused on the results. And so I find that that's really applicable to the work that I do. I found that book to be really helpful. And then there's a bunch of books. I'm trying to think that, because I think another thing that you have to think about when you get into leadership too is how to manage change. And because sometimes, your goals change, or sometimes, your work changes altogether. And so I've had a couple of really good reads on change management as well. And that's something I think that is very helpful.
Great. We'll include those in the show notes and share those resources as well. Appreciate that. And pivoting a little bit here to your current mission, because I think, which I think is important for the whole world and the country and all of us. For those that might not be as familiar with Artemis, could you share just a few minutes on that and how you think about impact of that mission on young engineers? Like, I grew up in the early days of the space shuttle, and came down to, I forget what STS it was, but it was 3 or 4, one of those. And it was part of what launched me, on a career of engineering. And just tell us a little bit about what should we expect as a community and a country, and what's headed our way with this incredible mission back to the moon.
Absolutely, I would love to. So Artemis is all about the return to the moon, and it is a return to the moon for humanity. We are going to the moon this time in a very sustainable way, and it is with commercial and international partners. So when we talk about going for humanity, it really is. I talk a lot about America's space program. I'm really proud to be a part of America's space program. And when I say it's America's space program, it really is, right? There are parts and systems and elements that are made across our country. So on launch day, when we have this vehicle, it's be right outside my window here, stacked, sitting at the pad, ready to go. On launch day for Artemis 1, all of the states in our wonderful, great nation are represented in the ground or on the flight systems. And so when we talk about America's rocket, when we talk about America's space program, it really, truly is that. And so this belongs to all of you. First off, in terms of Artemis and returning to the moon, it is to pave a way for, other deep space destinations like Mars, for the next giant leap. And so I look at when we did Apollo, back when we did Shuttle, with each of these great exploration programs, it ushers in scientific discovery, it ushers in technology advancement, and right along with that is the inspiration of a new generation of explorers and scientists. And so I think there is a lot to look forward to as we prepare to send humans back to the moon, the first woman and the next man. And then just this year, we will get ready to launch our first mission, which is uncrewed. It is a demonstration flight of the SLS rocket, which is the most powerful rocket that NASA has ever developed. We will launch that rocket with the Orion spacecraft up on top, upper stage, and then the Orion spacecraft up on top, and demonstrate the performance of the rocket along with the performance of the Orion spacecraft as we fly around the moon and then return back to Earth in preparation for a crewed flight in about 2 years. So the next few years are going to be terribly exciting as we get ready for boots on the moon. And it's something that I think the whole country should be watching for and engaged in, because this rocket and this program belongs to you.
That's a great way to think about it. And I think, as much as we as leaders all try to get our own teams and companies aligned with mission, I think you can count on the fact that we're all behind your mission and success and the potential for all of us to, in all those areas you mentioned. And I know we're running up on time. I had one other area I wanted to bring up with you, which is, and it might be hard for you to envision this because of where you're at. But one of the other perspectives we're trying to get communicated, not only to our young engineering audience and engineers everywhere, but to the broader business community, is the importance of having an engineer or a technical perspective in the room, in the leadership room, seat at the table. I mean, you've heard all the terminology. Any thoughts on that, and how, you wouldn't see a leader, an executive team of a major company or corporation or community for that matter, that didn't have in most cases, an attorney, didn't have an accountant, didn't have a marketing and salesperson, didn't have an HR leader. Part of the perspective that I've come to appreciate is in today's world, where so much of our economy and our society has a technological underpinning of its success. How important it is that engineers step into those kind of leadership roles and think about leadership as a duty that we all need to bring to our community, as a way of enriching the perspectives around the table and deepening, that appreciation for, you guys are well familiar with this, some, things can go wrong, and what are the potential solutions and ways out of that? Having a technical thinker in the room as part of those leadership teams, and the importance that can have for us.
Oh, I think it's tremendously important. Of course, I am an engineer, so, but I think it's important because there is not a field that you don't have to solve a problem. And so whether it's an engineering problem or a different kind of problem, one of the things that engineering prepares you for, and that you demonstrate throughout your career when you're working in that field, is kind of how, when we started off, right? We have a problem. And it is, how do you break that problem down into, one, how do we go solve it? What are our options for solving it? How do we go, I'm going to use a NASA word, but how do we go troubleshoot that? In other words, what's causing that problem? And so I believe that, your teams, when you have a problem solver or an engineer as part of that team, it just helps to drive good solutions, just as you laid out. I mean, there's, when you think about executive teams and you think about, well, there's probably an attorney piece and an HR piece, and you go through and you look at, how do you create this diversity, which is extremely important in all that we do, is to have different strengths as part of your team, and to have different areas where, maybe if you've got some blind spots, or maybe if you've got some areas where, it's in that collective strength that makes you good as an executive team, is my belief. Now, this is coming from an engineer, of course, but I think, we all have to solve problems, whether they're engineering problems or other kinds of problems. And engineers are really good at solving problems.
Well, thank you for that, Charlie, and thank you for what you're doing for all of us. Thanks for being there to solve any of those problems facing Artemis and getting back to the moon. We're confident you'll overcome them. Again, appreciate your time today. And there you have it, folks, from Charlie Blackwell Thompson, the Clemson engineer, woman leading us back to the moon on Mission Artemis. Thanks, folks.